Darcy Byrne. I'm the Mayor of the Inner West. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. I understand that we have an apology this evening from Councillor Raciti.
Also from Councillor Hesse.
And also from Councillor Hesse. Will someone move that they be accepted?
I move that one.
Moved by Councillor Macri, seconded by Councillor Passis. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I'll provide a notice of webcasting of the proceedings tonight. There's a camera which broadcasts the proceedings of our council meetings live onto YouTube and records them there for posterity. And we inform you of that at the beginning of council meetings so that you're aware of the legal implications of any public comments that you might make. Disclosures of interest. Councillors, are there any disclosures of interest tonight? No disclosures? Excellent. Could I ask everyone to please stand for a moment of quiet contemplation? Thank you. Please be seated. Next item on the agenda, item 6, confirmation of minutes of the meeting of the 30th of April. Are there any clarifications or corrections to those minutes, councillors? If not, will someone move their adoption? Moved by Councillor Stamler, seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Item 7, public forum. We'll now begin hearing from the registered speakers that we have for items to be considered tonight. Before we do so, I'll just outline for you the code of meeting practice as it relates to speakers in the public forum. Each citizen who attends the meeting and is registered to speak is entitled to 3 minutes. We're not in the practice of extending that time, and the reason is that if you're the last person to leave here tonight, you wish that everybody else had stuck to time. What buzzer are we using tonight?
It's a more subtle high-pitched buzzer than last week.
To provide some context for members of the gallery, we used to have quite a nice twinkling bell that reminded you when you were up to 2.5 minutes in your speech, which was replaced at the last meeting by quite a blunt instrument. Can I hear the one that we've got now? Okay. There'll be something that sounds after 2.5 minutes to let you know that you have 30 seconds to go, and then there'll be something else. Does it sound similar? There'll be another sound that sounds very similar, but a bit longer, perhaps more painful. After 3 minutes, and I'll then ask you to conclude your remarks and to sit down. We have registered speakers for 4 items tonight. Item 3, Elliott Park and Balmain Cove Companion Animal Access Review. Item 6, Notice of Motion Measles. Item 7, Notice of Motion Declaration of Climate Emergency. And item 11, New Start Raise the Rate campaign. So I'll begin with item 3. The first registered speaker is Ron Glue of Rozelle. Mr. Glue, do you want to come forward? You don't look like Ron Glue.
One of the other designated speakers, one of the debates was Ron Wright.
Are you Mr. Maher?
Yes.
Come forward.
I understand that there are in excess of 4,500 dogs registered in Rozelle and Balmain alone. To understand the issue of dogs off leash, I will briefly outline the benefits of dog ownership, both physical and social. The physical benefits include increased cardiovascular health, increased physical activity, and dogs are great motivators and personal trainers, never wanting to miss a training session, no matter the weather. The social benefits include those who have dogs and other pets, including children or adolescents, have been shown to have higher self-esteem. Dog owners report less depression. Dogs are also great caregivers. Dogs enhance the social connectiveness and are great conversation starters. In other words, they build communities. There are some 700 plus apartments in Balmain Shores and Balmain Cove, and we go into our apartments each day and close our doors. We don't have back fences where we can chat with our neighbours. Those of us with dogs do this in off-leash areas. My local parks, namely Bridgewater, Balmain Cove and Elliot, are mine and my fellow residents' backyards, so to speak. On arriving at one of these parks, Dion, my cavoodle, takes off to play with other dogs in his own environment, whilst I interact with other owners and discuss various topics from community happenings, sport, social media, and yes, even the weather. After 15 to 20 minutes, most disperse as they head off to work. We say goodbye until we meet again, normally in the same place within 24 hours. At other times, whilst walking my dog, I often meet fellow dog owners and again stop to chat and interact. In this way, I have met hundreds of my local neighbours. The trend for allowing dogs off leash is growing, as only last month the City of Sydney, via a public notice in the Inner West Courier, advertised a proposal in response to community request to establish an area of Harold Park at Forest Lodge for off-leash parks. The area from the Iron Cove Bridge to Balmain High, which includes Bridgewater Park, Balmain Cove and Elliot Park, is a perfect place for dogs off leash.
If you could conclude your remarks.
Thank you. I would like to thank Council for their community involvement with residents, which now spans 12 months. Now is the time to make Balmain Cove and Elliot Park dogs off leash, as 77% of submissions received supported being permanent. On behalf of all of those who use this area for off-leash walking, I would ask that a decision be made here tonight to allow it permanently.
Thank you, sir. Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Now, can I ask everyone who was able to hear the two warning bells to raise their hands? Okay. None of the councillors, but everyone at the back of the room. Let's see how we go. We'll come back to Mr. Glue when he arrives. Mr. Maher, if you could... Oh, he's here. Come on up, Ron.
Sorry about the tardiness. Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors. My name's Ron Glue. I'm have been the Community Association Chairman for Balmain Cove and Balmain Shores in sequence over the last 20 years. The area has expanded even further. Last time I spoke to you, we had about 1,200 apartments. We now have the Elliott Street apartment complex online. We're approaching 2,000. Each of those apartments are animal friendly, dogs and cats and birds and whatever. But what I am here to do is to commend the officers for their recommendations. It has been a good community process. Those in the immediate vicinity have addressed and put in their feelings on it. We have about not quite three-quarters, well, we have more than three-quarters of the community agreeing to it, but not quite 4/5. We have a situation where, and I can speak from experience, over the last 20 years, Elliott Park and the front section of Balmain Cove has been an off-leash area, irrespective. We do have a great community in that area, a very caring community, and everyone knows that Balmain and Rozelle are so dog-friendly, and there's so many animals there. With the amount of apartments that we do have in the immediate area, about 25–30% of those apartments have an animal, and those dogs really make up the character of the area. They are very, very community focused. Everyone watches everyone and make sure that they look after the environment. We pick up after the school children. We pick up after the not so complying dog owners. There are a few, but we've managed to either convince them not to attend or to at least pick up. And our ladies, particularly of an afternoon, are walking around. Any dog owner that does the wrong thing, they're chased and given a bag to pick up. So Simply and flatly, all we're doing is we've had this situation occurring for over, near enough to 20 years. I won't say over, but near enough to 20 years. It just reinforces what has happened. And I commend the decision to council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glue. Next item for which we have registered speakers is item 6, notice of motion on measles. And the first registered speaker is Carolyn O'Loughlin.
Good evening. I'd like to oppose the motion for its attack on free speech. They describe ill-informed or dangerous. I do have. They go very quiet. Yet we know what I know what happens, and other people know what happens. Due to this, the public is denied information needed to assess the benefit versus risk of all vaccines. That's what it basically comes to, benefit versus risk. And people of goodwill can have different opinions on this, and they shouldn't be censored over them. The influence of the big pharmaceutical companies, and they are in league with government to a great degree, appears to have an all-encompassing effect. They appear to have the media to do their bidding all the time. You don't hear the opposite side. In the USA, there appears to be more transparency. Indeed, some outbreaks of measles have been traced back to vaccinated individuals. The MMR vaccine is not that reliable, hence they have this rather inflated number to have herd immunity. It's because the effect wears off over time. And it's also complicated. There's wild measles going around, and then there's the measles in the vaccine going around. So there's all sorts of strange interactions going on. In 2009, there were documents, a group obtained documents under the Freedom of Information Act. And it shows that MMR2, the second one, was licensed on the basis of inadequate testing. Only 834 children were involved in the test, of whom 332 were given the new vaccine. The control group was given another vaccine rather than a true placebo like saline. Quite a lot of the children who had the MR2 vaccine had respiratory and gastrointestinal illness afterwards. It was in the vicinity of about 40%. Most serious of all, the children were only followed up for 42 days post-vaccination. Now, 42 days, surely it should be longer for a normal drug. The MR2 vaccine insert, and the vaccine insert shows that, it's pretty good, but at one point it states this: MMR2 has not been evaluated for carcinogenic or mutagenic potential or potential to infer fertility. So that's a direct quote from that. No one knows the long-term effects of vaccines. Since there has been increased vaccination, there's been a marked rise in chronic conditions like allergies and asthma. In fact, the Australian authorities are investigating the DPT vaccine in connection with this.
If you could conclude your remarks, please, Madam. Your time.
Just that I think that, I'm opposed to that motion because of its attack on free speech and its general prejudice against free speech and its use of censorship. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, raise your hand if you could hear the bell that time.
I heard it.
Well, we did have a functioning bell system previously that worked pretty well for the last year and a half. I couldn't hear it then, sorry. Is there something we can do to adjust it so it can be heard? Okay. Next item, item 7, notice of motion declaration of climate emergency. First speaker, Reid Pearce of Enmore.
My name is Reid Pearce, and I'm in support of declaring a climate emergency tonight. I'm with the local branch of the environmental group Extinction Rebellion, and I just first of all want to thank you for your time tonight. So 5 years ago, I immigrated to Australia in search of a better life and specifically chose to live in the Inner West because of its openness, inclusivity, and progressiveness. However, on the matter of climate change, the Inner West Council is lagging. Actually, climate change is no longer the term we should be using. It may have been a suitable term 40 years ago when scientists, governments, and corporations first determined that an increase in carbon emissions would lead to a hotter planet. more appropriate term is climate emergency because that is indeed what it is. Just in the last couple of months in Australia, we've had 1 million cows die in floods. Millions of fish died due to water shortage in the Murray-Darling River system. And 3.5% of Tasmania's land area burned down in fires, while all of New South Wales is in drought. As effects like these rise exponentially, our society will reach a breaking point. As a parent, I see the fear on my children's faces when they hear they may not have a hospitable planet to live on. How can we continue to let our children down like this? For them and their futures, I joined the group Extinction Rebellion as I was inspired by their last-ditch effort to save the planet. This nonviolent activist group inspired me in their clear and non-political demands, which are: number one, insist governments tell the truth about the climate catastrophe; number two, rapidly decarbonize the economy; and number three, democratize the transition to a carbon-free future by having a citizens' assembly oversee the process. The first demand is why I'm here today. We've been misled by the federal and state governments that climate catastrophe is somehow avoidable as long as we make minor changes down the road. No serious proposals have been made, and meanwhile more coal is being dug up whilst the Great Barrier Reef is dying. Our council is complicit in this ecocide. Now is the time to stand and declare a climate emergency. By declaring a climate emergency, we join councils around the world and 17 other councils around Australia, including local ones like Randwick and the Blue Mountains. We will also be following in the steps of the UK and Irish parliaments, which recently declared climate emergencies. More than 400 councils across Australia, Canada, US, the UK, and Switzerland have all declared climate emergencies, with more every day. Will Interwest join this group of global leaders or not? The ultimate aim is a national declaration of a climate emergency with its ability to unlock all the required policy changes and funds for a rapid climate emergency response. But local councils like Interwest can start the ball rolling by demonstrating successful climate emergency initiatives at the local level. The question you have to ask yourself,
Time has expired, sir. If you could
okay,
conclude
if
your
not
remarks.
now, when? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dominic Case of Balmain East.
Thank you, Mayor. My name's Dominic Case. I'm with the local group Climate Change Balmain Roselle. Well, the previous speakers made the situation for this motion very clear indeed. Anything less than dramatic and urgent action on the climate will lead to disastrous consequences. When this council was elected a couple of years ago, many of the councillors presented strong positions on climate change, and council moved quickly to adopt many of those policy positions and has signed up to the city's power partnership agreement. But for many people, the language has already changed, at least from climate change to climate crisis. The gap between the most we can practically achieve in the time left to mitigate change and the least we need to do to avoid disaster is narrowing dramatically. And what we're actually doing falls far short of both of those trajectories. Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish schoolgirl, told world leaders at the Davos Economic Summit, "I want you to panic." In Poland, at the Climate Summit, 93-year-old Sir David Attenborough said, "The world's people want you, the decision makers, to act now. Leaders of the world, you must lead." Somehow, combining those elements of panic and leadership, we must find the right formula, but it must include a recognition at every level of leadership that we no longer have any time to lose. So maybe even the word crisis isn't enough. Without panicking, but a clear understanding that more than ever we need leaders to unite us in making the necessary changes to our ways of doing things and taking care of anyone who is affected by those changes. Sounds pretty much like a classic emergency to me. As we've heard, 17 councils in Australia have already declared that we face a climate emergency. I think it's over 500 councils around the world, and of course we've heard that the government in Westminster has voted to declare a climate emergency. I see that as quite an achievement. Westminster hasn't really agreed on anything much recently, so that's surely a powerful step forward. But what is achieved by declaring a climate emergency at council level? This motion isn't hopefully yet, about a World War II scenario of requisitioning factories and issuing ration books. It is about, at the very least, coordinated action at every level of government if we are to succeed. It's about showing leadership. It's about holding council to a number of key performance indicators, and it's about, and I quote our Mayor, Councillor Byrne, in 2017, it's about our newly elected council punching above its weight in the national environmental debate. So I urge councillors not only to support this motion, but also to continually seek ways in which council can put these words into action, and to prioritise climate and emissions outcomes in consideration of every single action that council takes. Every single action. Anything less is a missed opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Gillian Raffel.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of several local Stop Adani groups. My name is Gillian Raffel, and I've raised my family in Summerhill for the last 22 years. For the last 6 years, I've been active in grassroots groups seeking to take action to tackle the climate crisis that we're in. Since it was approved in 2014, I have been most concerned with stopping the Adani mine. Along with others in the Stop Adani movement, we've worked to stop the money flowing to the mine, to build a movement of people willing to take action, and to change the politics around climate change. I think we've made significant headway in this endeavour, and I think we're seeing that right now in relation to this federal election campaign. Tonight, as I said, I'm speaking on behalf of several Stop Adani groups, and they include Sydney, Marrickville, Lewisham, Redfern and Glebe. We in the Stop Adani groups know that people in the inner west are concerned about climate change and the signs of impending ecological breakdown. For many months now, we have had hundreds of conversations with people throughout the inner west, in door knocks, market stalls, rallies, movie nights, and lots of other things. People have clearly expressed to us their worry and outrage at the political inaction on this issue. Both at the federal and state levels, it's miles too difficult to engage politicians in dialogue about taking meaningful action on climate change and the impending ecological breakdown. Both the major parties currently, for example, support the Adani mine, even though well over 70% of Australians do not. Councils are the closest level of government to the people. Councils making statements about values of their community is important and influential. I have been proud of this council's moves in terms of its divestment motions, in joining the Cities Power Partnership, and just last year resolving to support the Stop Adani campaign. Other progressive New South Wales councils have declared a climate emergency. It's now time that Inner West, that is a well-known progressive council, join them. A simple, powerful council statement of concern and a resolution to act accordingly is a very significant communication device in pressing for rapid and dramatic action by other levels of government. I think all of us here tonight will agree to stand up and acknowledge hope you agree to stand up and acknowledge the climate emergency that we're in and join other progressive councils in seeking to press for action, urgent action. Thank you.
The next item for which we have registered speakers is item 11, and the first speaker is Thomas Studans of Carlton in New South Wales.
Good evening, Council, and to all present. My name is Tom Studans. I am New South Wales Coordinator of the Australian Unemployed Workers Union, who've been campaigning for a raise to Newstart for many years. I've been a resident of and a Newstart recipient in the Inner West Council area from 2013 to 18, and I continue to work with our members, our Inner West branch, and other Centrelink recipients in the area. Newstart was last raised in real terms when I was 3 years old. I'm 28 now. I'm reliably informed that it wasn't much money then either. Since that time, there's been consensus in federal parliament that not only should the benefit not be raised, but it shouldn't even keep pace with the growth condition of capitalism. It's an increasingly extreme view and doesn't reflect wider community sentiment. As a nation, at every level of public life, we must make clear that this orthodoxy doesn't serve anybody outside the federal party rooms, and we'll tolerate it no longer. Like a staggering 1 in 4 New Start recipients, I have significant medical barriers to work. It's commonly known as a disability. However, 73% of disability pension claims are rejected, so is mine. As anyone in my situation will tell you, it's a living hell, a horror difficult to conceive of in a wealthy city like Sydney. I've been forced to skip meals and my psychiatric medication more times than I can count. It's hard to access treatment consistently on a low income. My mental illness has deteriorated and been made more complex by a combination of extreme poverty and a punitive privatized employment services environment. I'm lucky enough to have survived, many of us do not. Currently, the AUWU is one of the only organisations in a position to keep track of the human cost of social security policy in Australia, and we hear of suicides on a weekly basis. During my time in the Inner West, I spent around 70 to 80% of my New Start on rent. What this meant for me was isolation, hunger, and fear, and also that I don't live here anymore because I can't afford it. The cost of living in Sydney is prohibitive to the ability of those on New Start to have lasting human connections. It's soul-destroying to experience and a barrier to council efforts to build inclusive communities. But if left unchecked, it poses a serious risk to society. The combination of intense vulnerability and isolation, when mainstream politics has invalidated you for so long and you see no way out, you're left with a hostility and nowhere to challenge it. We know that 20% of One Nation voters support a raise to New Start, and I've personally witnessed politicians manipulate this discussion within the LGA to promote white supremacist talking points. At a time when public faith in politics is so low, I urge the council, show us that you've got our backs and you will take up this fight with us. We're looking to you for leadership where others continue to fail time and again. Support the motion, raise the rate.
Our last registered speaker is Rosanna Barbaro of Newtown.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to address this forum tonight. My name is Rosanna and I live and work in the Inner West. I'm the CEO of the Addison Road Community Centre organisation, and we see an integral link to economic injustice, the climate crisis and social inequality. And so I'm here to talk about what we see on a weekly basis, which now we've reached 1,250 families that line up to get food support from our food pantry. I know that a couple of council meetings ago you had Dulce, one of our staff here, talking about Mama Penny. We've increased our outreach program because the demand is exceeding what we're able to provide to our community. And what we hear on a daily basis, and I said today to the lineup, I said, I'm going to address the council today. What would you like me to say? And they said, tell them that we are human beings and that we are suffering and we cannot live on the New Start rate. Something has to be done because this situation is punishing the poor and we haven't done anything. I'm not here to tell my esteemed councillors and the leaders of our community about the statistics that prove the growing inequality in Australia. I'm not here to tell you where the wealth is because we know where the wealth is, and I'm not here to tell you the percentage of people that are on New Start and are doing it tough, and I'm not here to tell you that the middle class is also suffering. I'm here to tell you that on a daily basis we see and hear people's humiliation and difficulty in paying the rent, making choices about what food items they should buy, making choices about the lights on, about where they can live, where they can't live, where they can travel to, what they should do, how can they access dental, whether they go to job providers, how stressed stressful and anxious that experience can be because they're treated really badly. I'm here to say that it's time that we, along with council and other citizens, are reminded that 70% of Australians support the Raise the Rate campaign. There is nobody that can say that they can live on $40 a day. Absolutely nobody can, and that's also proven. So I'd just like to use my 4 minutes to remind everybody it's time.
Is that going to be a recording of Little Paddy?
I wanted to sing.
Okay. Maybe we can do some interpretive dance later on. Okay. Thank you very much all for your contributions. We'll now move on with the rest of the business on the agenda. There's not a lot on the agenda tonight, so if you'd like to stick around, it won't be too long until we get to your item. If you need to go, you are able to watch the proceedings at home on YouTube, as I mentioned previously. We've got one condolence motion and one mayoral minute tonight as the next items on the agenda. The condolence motion is in honour of Father John Pearce, formerly the priest at St Bridget's Church in Marrickville, who passed away the weekend before last. Father Pearce was a very well-loved and respected figure in the Marrickville community, played a great role in...
But the most important thing, he was a humble person. He talked to everyone, and he paid respect to everyone, especially from disadvantaged background. So I share with you, and I congratulate you for such very important mayoral minute. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Father John will be remembered for many things in the community. He was always, and he did listen, but he wasn't afraid to tell you what he thought either. So, and that was the thing I liked about him. He wasn't afraid of making difficult decisions as far as the church was concerned regarding the actual continuation of the church, the masses, the order of the masses, and it disenfranchised some people that were used to their traditional ways, but he was progressive in that way, and he was looking after the greater community. So
important, and we have the capacity to advocate and to advocate really well and really effectively for our community if we have the will to do it. So I contest what Councillor Burns said. We can and we should support this motion, and we can and we should and we must advocate strongly to get New Start, raise the rate, and to get a good rate of at least 75 immediately. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kiat.
Thanks to Councillor Steer, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Skandar and Councillor Porteous, and thanks again to the campaigners who have come today. And of course to ACOS and the campaigner, I think Paz, who contacted me about this in the first place. I'd only conclude by saying I don't think it's meaningless what ACOS or UWU or Addison Road have done today in bringing this to us. I think, as far as I know, there's only one federal seat in the country where they have a member from a party who has committed to the minimal demand from ACOS, which is an immediate $75 increase, and that's the seat of Melbourne. That's held by Adam Bant. So I think every local government area who is committed to this campaign should be signalling to the members who represent them in the federal parliament that this is important. And I hope that we'll see that through the ALP, and I hope we can blame Peter Dutton and Tony Abbott and Josh Frydenberg as much as we like, but if there's a Labor government and there's not an increased New Start, well then the Labor government's a problem. So
I'm glad this has been blatantly partisanised. That's a very effective...
Point of order.
You raised the issue. I think it is important they raise it tonight. And look, I want to thank Addison Road for the work they're doing in our community, and I'd love to come and see the work that you do at the food bank as well.
Thank you for that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. I declare the meeting closed.
Important. And we have the capacity to advocate really well and really effectively for our community if we have the will to do it. So I contest what Councillor Byrne said. We can and we should support this motion, and we can and we should and we must advocate strongly to get New Start, raise the rate, and to get a good rate of at least 75 immediately. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kiat.
Thanks to Councillor Steer, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Skandar and Councillor Porteous, and thanks again to the campaigners who have come today. And of course to ACOS and the campaigner, I think Paz, who contacted me about this in the first place. I'd only conclude by saying I don't think it's meaningless what ACOS or UWU or Addison Road have done today in bringing this to us. I think, as far as I know, there's only one federal seat in the country where they have a member from a party who has committed to the minimal demand from ACOS, which is an immediate $75 increase, and that's the seat of Melbourne. That's held by Adam Bant. So I think every local government area who is committed to this campaign should be signalling to the members who represent them in the federal parliament that this is important. And I hope that we'll see that through the ALP, and I hope we can blame Peter Dutton and Tony Abbott and Josh Frydenberg as much as we like, but if there's a Labor government and there's not an increased New Start, well then the Labor government's a problem. So
I'm glad this has been blatantly partisanised. That's a very effective
Point of order.
You raised the issue. I think it is important they raise it tonight. And look, I want to thank Addison Road for the work they're doing in our community, and I'd love to come and see the work that you do at the food bank as well.
Thank you for that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. I declare the meeting closed.